Okay, we are going to be looking in Proverbs chapter 1 again this evening, and it's going to be the first chapter has a good bit to say, basically about choosing companions as well as the love of money. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So let's go ahead and we won't read the whole thing just for time's sake. I'd hate to be cut off again like I was last week when it cut me off, but anyway. But in Proverbs chapter 1, let's start reading in verse 8. It says, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother, for they will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck." Let me make it a little bit bigger. "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your foot from their path. For their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird, but they lie in wait for their own blood. They lurk secretly for their own lives. So are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its owners. So we'll pause right there just for a little bit. So our first question tonight, as the passage says, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, "Come with us," don't do it. Um, there's another proverb, and it's over in chapter 12. In chapter 12, at verse 26, it reads this way. It says, "The righteous should choose his friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray." And so I was just wondering if you want to talk about why should one be careful about choosing their companions? And the second part of question one is why is that not always easy? So why should we be real careful about who we choose to be our companions? Anyone want to help us with that?
I wrote down that evil companionship corrupts.
Yeah. Yeah, Nancy, I can't remember where that verse is. Where is that verse?
I
Did you
don't
write it?
know. No, I didn't. I just kind of remembered it, but I don't, I'd have to look it up. I can do that.
Let me see if I can
Okay.
find that real quick. What is evil? Is it evil companions or
Corinthians,
evil?
1 Corinthians 15 and 33.
First
Thank
Corinthians
you.
15, verse 33. Thank you for that. First Corinthians 15 33. Let me flip over there. That's interesting because First Corinthians 15 is the chapter that's all about the resurrection. First Corinthians 15:33 says, "Do not be deceived, evil company corrupts good habits." When we look at that in the context, I think what he's talking about, again, within the context, is you better be real careful with those false teachers because there were folks in Corinth who were teaching that the resurrection was past. You see that over in verses 12 down through verse 16. And so he's telling them to be real careful. Anyone else have any comments or thoughts on that? Go ahead, Brenda.
Um, People sometimes don't have the right self-esteem or self-confidence in themselves, and so they're easily flattered,
Okay.
or people are entice them to come in their direction to do the things they're not supposed to do, just because they don't know any better to some degree.
Yeah. They're easily led astray.
Mhm.
Sort of like what we talked about, the unstable are easily led, and that's just the reality of it. And it's like we need to be grounded. I always think it's difficult in reading Proverbs because it's Solomon, and Solomon for all of his pros and cons. And so but at the same time, it's a great sadness here as he writes, "My son, hear the instruction of your father." And he wants his son, and you may be asking, well, which son is that? Because he probably had lots of sons. considering all the women he had. But the one we know about is Rehoboam. And there Rehoboam is, and right out of the gate, when those individuals, Jeroboam and the others, come to him and they say, lighten our load. And Rehoboam asks the older counselors, what should I do? And they say, go easy on them and they'll serve you. And then he asks the young fellows he grew up with, and they say, lay it on them. And let's just say Rehoboam doesn't exhibit real good leadership quality there. And it's just a sadness that Rehoboam was pretty easily led astray. Go ahead, Pat.
I think sometimes, like with Rehoboam, it's because deep down that's what they want to do.
Yeah,
They've
probably
already made
so.
up their mind what they want to do, and so they found somebody to say, "Yeah, that's what you ought to do." So they got somebody agreeing with them, with what they already believe.
Yeah.
So it's easier to go along with somebody that you agree with
You
than
know,
it is.
there is a progression there, isn't there, Pat?
Mm-hmm.
And that sometimes, if you're already leaning that way, all you need is someone to send you an invite or give you a little
Right,
nudge
right.
to get you over the edge. But sometimes you may not be leaning that way, and then we're back to Nancy's verse about corrupting good morals. It's like you may
Mm-hmm.
have good morals, like Solomon. I think Solomon started off very good,
Mm-hmm.
but then he marries all those women and they led him astray. And so you may be at different points along that progression. But the bottom line is like that's why you better be real careful about choosing your friends. Whether we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about just friends or whether we're talking about marriage or whatever it is we're talking about. If sinners entice you, do not consent. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I think really with like Rehoboam, I think that he didn't reason in his mind. He just listened. He didn't look at the consequences. He didn't look at
No.
anything. He just believed it. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
believed it wrong.
Yeah. And real quickly, the kingdom's divided. It's like, did he realize the kingdom was, and they just about had a civil war there within that chapter real quickly. And it's like, Rehoboam, did you realize what was going to happen when you spouted off like that? Probably not. But anyway, the second part of that question was, why is it not always easy to, in choosing our companions? I think one reason would just be we all like to have friends. That's one thing. Everyone likes to have friends, typically. And sort of, what Pat was touching on, maybe a little bit, we all like to have approval. And you have different proverbs that talk about, as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the counsel of his friend. Well, some people don't like friends that are like that. They don't want friends to sharpen them. They want friends to just tell them how good they are. They're just looking for approval. But I think at least for me, and then I'll throw it back to you. One reason it's not always easy, not saying you shouldn't do it, but it's just difficult, is just the lack of righteous people there are.
Right.
And I mean, when the kids are in school and it's like, you know, or at work or wherever it is, it's like, how many righteous are there? I mean, think about Daniel's three friends. Everyone else is bowing down. And it's like those three better stick together because there weren't too many Jews in Babylon who were wanting to do the right thing. And that's just the reality of it. You have any other thoughts or anything on
Yeah,
that
John.
question? Go ahead, Bruce, and then Mark.
That's why gangs are so popular because they want you in there and they want you to be a part of them.
Yeah,
And they'll probably pat you on the back and if you join them and who knows what you're going to do. Just like in this Proverbs that we just read, come with
yeah.
us. We'll divide the booty and you'll prosper with us.
And I will say the thing about that before I forget it. There is no honor among thieves.
Right, right about that.
And so they may say, "Oh, you'll prosper with us." Don't be surprised if that doesn't pan out, just because there is no honor amongst them typically. Mark, what did you have a moment ago?
Oh, um, yeah, with the good and the bad kind of, unfortunately, it seems that often the evil sort of pulls away the good
Yeah,
more than the good pulls away the evil. Uh, just how it is. So, like sometimes a young lady might marry this guy, and she's, after we're married, I'm going to change him and all this stuff, and that usually doesn't happen. And then, yeah, like you said, there's only sometimes there's just few. Uh, Worthy ones around, and sometimes you may have to go your own way and be a little lonely sometimes too, and
yeah,
it'll work out.
yeah, yep, absolutely. Both of those were good points. Typically, like you said, you would like to think that, oh, in choosing your companions, oh, I can bring them up to where they need to be. And you try, you know, but you better be realistic and realize a little leaven leavens the whole lump. And as said, Solomon found that out pretty quickly. Okay, question number two. What are the verses 10 down through verse 19? What are they really a depiction of?
Is it peer pressure?
Peer pressure, okay. Anyone else have anything?
Going after the weak.
Going after the weak? Anyone else have any thoughts?
They're just wanting to do harm. They have no conscience and they're wanting to shed blood and
Yeah.
rob people of their possessions.
And I guess what I thought was interesting about the passage is that, you go through it and you would think it's like, oh, well, he's talking about those who are violent and, things along those lines. But then he gets to the end and he says, this is the way of everyone who's greedy for gain. And it's like he's just talking, Keith, to your point. Keith, how did you phrase it a minute ago?
Going after the weak.
Going after the weak. In my notes, I put it's like they're just users and takers. Just that idea. It's like they're users, they're takers, they are pressuring. To Nancy's point, they are pressuring. Frankly, the passage goes on. Verse 22 says, "How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity?" So they are pressuring those who don't know any better, and they don't have any conscience. To Brenda's point, it's like they're seeing who they can take advantage of. And there's a lot of people like that in the world, that are just users. They're just takers. It's just what's in it for them. I was trying to think of in Scripture. In Scripture, can you think of those who were just who would be described like that? That they're just users. Can you think of any? I'll tell you a few who I was thinking of. You know how Simon the sorcerer is depicted before he becomes a Christian, and it's like he was amazing the people and claiming to be this great power of God. Do you really think he cared about all those people? It's like no, he was doing it for the money. Is what he was doing, and he was just a user. Other thing, false teachers, false teachers, and frankly even true teachers. And the reason I say true teachers, remember the passage when Paul talks about that there were those who were teaching and preaching, but they were just doing it. They were doing it. Oh, how does he phrase it? I think it's in Philippians. Let me flip over there real quick. He says the former preach Christ from selfish ambition. Now, Paul, he goes on to say concerning himself, he says, to paraphrase it, I'm just glad they're preaching the truth. But there's people out there who just preach the truth, who preach the truth, and they're just doing it out of selfish ambition. They really are just hirelings. And that's a sad thing. One other one, and then you can mention any that you think of. Judas. I think Judas would be a good example of someone he's just a user and a taker, especially there at the end. When the Lord is anointed and he says, "Oh, why wasn't this, sold so that all that money could be given to the poor?" Pardon me for knocking the camera. Why wasn't this sold so this could all be given to the poor? It says this he said not because he cared for the poor, but because he used to take the money that was in the treasury box. And it's like he's just a user. He's just a taker. Can you think of any others in scripture that might fit the bill? I think ultimately the devil. The
Well,
devil's just a
Jezebel.
user and a taker. What'd you say, Nancy?
I said Jezebel
Jezebel?
when they just took that, what was his name? Nabor, something, his vineyard.
Oh yeah. When
They just stoned him
yeah, when
with a
they
false
oh,
accusation
oh
and
I
then
can't remember the
stoned him.
guy's name, Nancy, but
Begins
yeah,
with an
when
N.
when Ahab is all sad because he won't give me that vineyard, and Jezebel says,
Right.
"Don't worry, we'll just kill him." And it's
Yeah.
okay. That's one way to do it. She
Amen.
became dog food in the end.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah, she did.
go
Praise
ahead, Pat.
Haman,
Who?
Naaman.
Haman.
Haman. Okay, in the book of Esther, in that
Mm-hmm.
Haman,
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
Haman who
Ananias and Sapphira.
Ananias and Sapphira as they lie to the Holy Spirit. So Haman was the one in Esther who, it's all about him. It's like, oh, everyone's bowing down before me except that stinking Mordecai. And Mordecai just won't bow down before me. And so he's just going to kill all the Jews. And he tells the king, I'll give you all this money if I can just do this. And that accounts with Haman being hung on his own gallows. Ananias and Sapphira, Bruce mentioned, and just greedy, just lovers of money. Anyway, there's probably others, but here in this passage, it's like this is what we're talking about. Those who they're just greedy for money, and I think this is the thing. They're greedy for money and they're willing to do anything for it. Anything for it. And it's anyway, anything for a buck. So let's go on to question 3. Question 3 is how does the love of money take away the life of its owner? And that's verse 19 again. So are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its owner. How does that work? Go ahead, Michael.
It blinds you.
Okay. It blinds you and it's like you're only thinking about one thing and you don't see anything else, right? The foolish farmer. You have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. And what does he not know? You fool, this night your soul will be required of you. And then whose will those things be? And so that brings up another issue, namely, you're not taking it with you. That's one of the problems. Anyway, but what else would you say? And by the way, concerning the love of money, the love of money passage is 1 Timothy 6 at verse 10. And it says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which many, how does it phrase it? Which many have pierced themselves through with many sorrows, is how it phrases it. And that's
you
really
pro-
what we're talking about. So, anyone else have any comments? How does
you
it
could
take away the
probably
life of its owner? Go ahead, Keith.
probably sorry about that. You could
No, you're
probably
right.
put power in with that too. You
Okay,
got money, you got power.
sure. One or the other, or both. How else would you say it takes away the life of its owner?
I think it corrupts people because a lot of times when people are really greedy, they find that the end can justify the means.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot of corruption, and then it can lead to stress, poor relationships, poor health, because all you care about is the end result, which is having more. And also, you find that greedy people are really never quite satisfied. They always want more.
Nancy, you
Oh,
mentioned
yeah.
about 5 or 6 things in there. So let's start with that last one first. Okay, not satisfied. Passage says those who what's to say? Those who love money or love silver are not satisfied with silver.
Mhm.
I'm paraphrasing that badly, but it's that idea. It's like you never say enough.
Right.
Those who are greedy never learn contentment. They never do. Nancy, what was the other things in your list about? You had relationships?
Relationships, it can affect your health, stress. If you're in a lot of debt, you become a slave to your um, lender,
Yep,
sort of become a slave, or you can.
yep.
Um,
So, and that's, I mean, I think you're right. I have slave on mine as well, right next to the word work. And I've known plenty of people who outwardly it's like, oh, well, they just have a job. No, they're a slave. They are a slave. And they're a slave because of their choices that they've made, frankly. To the point about health that Nancy mentioned, you might think about that idea of worry. There's plenty of proverbs that speak to this issue as well. Worry and anxiety and things along those lines, and that it's, rottenness to the bones, things like that. A merry heart does good like a medicine, but those who are greedy, mm-mm, they don't learn contentment. Godliness with contentment is great gain, but greediness, mm-mm. Concerning relationships that Nancy mentioned, you might think about how greed will affect a marriage. You might think about husbands or wives or whatever it is spending more and more time apart because of these issues, things like that. Um, when Jesus talked about riches, it's like he just talked about trusting in riches. And people just they put their trust in riches, and the problem with that is riches are fleeting. It's like you can't rely on them. What other things would you say about how it takes
Yeah,
away the
John.
life? Go ahead, Bruce.
Um, it's not in the Bible, but it's A Christmas Carol with Scrooge. He is a great example of someone who has lots of money and is very unhappy.
Yep. Especially this time of year, I'm sure people are watching the various movies and whatnot with that depiction. And it's just, what are you living for? And that's just how, that's how some people are. And in my notes, I put the word glasses. And what I mean by that is people who love money, it becomes the lens that they see everything through. And it's just all they think about. And it is a sad thing to see, frankly, because it's how they view everything. It's how they view their fellow man. It's how they view the church. It's how they view it's how they view so many different things. It's how they view everything, actually, because it really is all they think about. And it really does take away the life of its owner. And think about someone who had trouble with this, and the Lord's with the rich young ruler comes to Jesus. And he's like, "Oh, all this I've kept from my youth." And Jesus says, "Well, if you really want to be perfect, this is what you got to do. Sell what you have and give it to the poor." And it's like, "Well," and the fella goes away sad because he has great possessions. And all of a sudden he comes to Jesus, and granted he says, "Good teacher, what shall I do?" But it's like all these I've kept from my youth. He's like the typical Pharisee. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. I've done this. I've kept these commands. He is so lifted up in pride. He's the rich young ruler. And Jesus, in one fell swoop, brings him right down to earth. And he goes home sorrowful. And he's just filled with sorrow. You kind of hope that he's filled with godly sorrow. We don't know because the account just kind of stops right there. But it's like that's what his whole life was. And all of a sudden you just realize and it's just an amazing thing. when people view the whole life through these things. Uh, any other questions or comments up to this point? Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, really, just like Paul wrote to Timothy in First Timothy 6:7. You brought nothing into this world; you'll take nothing with you on the
Yep.
way out.
Let's see. Is that First Timothy? Yeah. I was just thinking that basically I never connected before, and I should have if I could get my fingers to work. That what Paul is doing is basically echoing what Job says. When Job is speaking to his wife. What passage is that, Michael? That's First
Uh,
Timothy 6.
6:7.
Yep, 6:7. That's right after and actually tie this in with some other points. He's talking about false teachers, and he's talking about there in verse 5. Those who do those things, who suppose that godliness is a means of gain, from such withdraw yourself. Now, godliness with contentment is great gain, not monetarily, but learning contentment. And for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out, and having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, a snare, and many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in perdition. Okay. Question number 4 is why is greed and worldliness in general, why is it a futile way to live one's life? Go ahead, Mike.
Because it's fleeting.
Yep.
Exactly what it is. It's here now, gone.
Yep. And if it's fleeting and either it can be fleeting while we are alive or it will certainly be fleeting when we're dead. And it's like you're not taking it with you. Despite what all the pharaohs thought,
Right.
it's like bury me with all my riches. Occasionally have y'all will see a funeral account, an obituary,
Mm.
where like I remember one that Dad shared one time where he was buried in his I can't remember what it was, he was buried in his 68 Pontiac Firebird. He was buried in his car because he loved his car. And it's like you can't take it with you, fella. But so that's one reason. What else might you say? Why else is greed and worldliness in general? Why is it just futile?
I wrote down from 1 John 3:15. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. The lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. It's
Okay.
just it's just not congruent with his plan for us
Yeah, you cannot serve
to
God
master.
and mammon.
Right.
You can't serve two masters. Anyone else have any other?
True riches are found in Christ, and true happiness is found in Jesus also.
Yeah. And the true riches, when the Lord talks about it, he says, don't lay up treasure where moth and rust destroy, but lay up treasure in heaven. And I know that kind of goes to Michael's point as well about fleetingness. But it's like the true riches are eternal.
Sure.
Worldly riches are just temporary. What other points would you make? Go ahead, Mark.
Um, yeah, all in all, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. It's emptiness, a striving, with the wind. And ultimately, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, as the wise man
Yep.
said. So, you know,
And Solomon, it's like, people have been trying to figure out for a long time, when did Solomon write Ecclesiastes? Whether it was at the beginning of his life or at the end, don't know. But when he gets to the end and he says, this is the conclusion of the matter. You fear God and keep his commandments. And I mean, ultimately, it's vanity because you can't take it with you, A. And B, you have to deal with Judgment Day. It doesn't offer the answer to real issues. It is so myopic. It's so short-sighted. It doesn't deal with those issues. that there is going to be a judgment day. We will give an account for the things we've done in the body, and you start dealing with those issues. And I was thinking about in Acts 24 when Paul is on trial and he's speaking to Felix there. And and there Felix was probably pretty wealthy, is my guess. And in Acts 24 at verse 25, it says, "Now as he reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid." And it's like you got to deal with those issues, and all the money in the world does not deal with those issues of righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come. And it's like you got to look beyond this life. Just the fact that we die, just the fact that we die. I think a part of that is you have to think about what's on the other side of death. If we lived forever here on this earth, well, then by all means, eat, drink, and be merry.
Sure.
But if it's appointed for man once to die and then the judgment, oh, well, then you better prepare. And riches do not do that. Any other thoughts about that question or anything else?
I was just going to bring up about the stock market crash.
Which
You
one?
know, the early one.
Yeah, 1927.
Yeah,
And they had stockbrokers throwing themselves out their
out
office
the window.
windows.
Yep.
And it's just a sad thing that and it's a sad thing, and it helps you realize just how fleeting riches are. Um, and we're thankful that our citizenship is in heaven, and we look beyond this life. But I'm sure there's a multitude of other passages that we could talk about concerning choosing companions, and you might think about concerning that discussion of choosing companions. Whoo, I wouldn't put a number on it, but what percentage of when you're choosing friends, what are most people in the world, what are they chasing?
Lust, moolah, moolah.
Chasing money. One way or the other. Whether it's
Sure.
money or, whatever it is, but and it's just it's so easy to go down and fall into that trap. And so the proverb is written. You might also think about, we still have about 3.5 minutes, the remainder of Proverbs, and I'll go ahead and put this back on the screen. As you have wisdom personified. And so she calls aloud, she cries out. Verse 22, how long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? For scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. Turn at my rebuke. Surely I will pour out my spirit on you. You might notice verse 25, because you disdained all my counsel and would have none of my rebuke, I will also laugh at your calamity. The storm comes one way or the other. I will mock you when your terror comes. Verse 28, then they will call on me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. Verse 33, but whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure without fear of evil. What's the common denominator between the wise man and the foolish man? The storm comes to both.
Sure.
The storm comes. And if you put your trust in riches,
Sure.
you're building on the sand. And the house may look real good before the storm comes. We've all seen those houses, and they are fabulous looking houses built right on the cliff. And then the cliff doesn't exist anymore,
Sure.
and they're down in the water. So, anyone have anything else in the last couple minutes? Go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, really, that, just like really in Luke 16, between the rich man and Lazarus, there is a gulf between,
Yep.
paradise and Hades,
Yep. And I will say in this whole discussion, I think, it's one reason that Timothy, can't remember if it's Timothy or Titus, riches are not inherently evil.
Mhm.
They're just a tool. Let those who are rich be rich in good works. And that's how you find out whether you love money or not, whether you'll put your blessings to use. Anyone have anything else?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark. You have a minute and a half.
Okay. What Keith was saying there, in the depression there, when it first happened, because we talk about that in the classroom, but yeah, a lot of these people jumped out the window and killed themselves. So, I asked, why did they do that? Well, their whole self-image and concept was tied up in their wealth. And if they didn't have any wealth, they're nothing. They don't have
Yep.
anything. Uh, Now there were some, of course, that lost everything and they sold apples and they made it back actually, but it did happen. So we
Yep.
try to tell them you can't have your self-concept built up in stuff and what you have and all of that. That's
Yep.
the thing.
There's a better way to live our lives. Appreciate y'all. Hope everyone has a good week. Enjoy the warm weather that's coming in. We're about to get the great yo-yo in northern Ohio back and forth. So appreciate
You don't
y'all.
like it? Wait 5 minutes. It'll change.
Yeah, there you go. Y'all take care.
All right.
Okay, John, thanks.
Yep. Thank you.